Well, it does seem like the time that England squads are on everybody's mind. We have the European Championships a couple of months away. And this is the moment we've been looking forward to. They both get the chance to pick their 23s for the European Championships.
And we don't know each other's squads here, do we?
You don't. Gary's actually been in this position before, obviously, with Roy Hodgson. So before we actually get into the... before we get into the names, a bit of decorum, Jamie. Give us an idea of the process. I mean, we heard from Gareth Southgate this week talk about almost like a batting order for each position to try and whittle it down. And of course, injuries can play their part as well. But how do you start this process?
I think, obviously, I think the same for every England manager. You're always talking about 2 or 3. You pick the first 20. They just come to everyone's lips. I don't think anybody questions them. I think specific issues for Gareth will be... I always think, imagine losing a player. So you lose Harry Maguire. That's a big problem for Gareth Southgate.
His biggest problem?
Yeah, I think it's his biggest problem. Because I think if you then got John Stones left as your other centre-back, and you think you've got Stones and Mings as your centre-backs, Stones and Cody, Stones and Dyer, I'm not having it. And
you think Harry Maguire's a bigger loss than Harry Kane?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. For this squad, for this particular squad, look, Harry Kane's the best player in the squad. But for this particular squad, if Gareth wants to have a back four and go 4-3-3, the only chance of that is keeping Harry Maguire fit, in my mind. I think you've seen Cody in the back four tonight. Mings in the back four, I like him, but I don't think he can play in the back four at the level we're talking about in terms of winning a tournament. And that's what Gareth's got to try and do, and what he'll be thinking he can do.
Who fills in for Harry Kane then?
No, I think there's a problem as well with Harry Kane. He's the next on my list. But let me finish with the centre-back first. So I think you've got to think about who can play as a back three. That's the next thing. So you've got to think, if Maguire goes, who can play in a back three? That'll be a consideration for Gareth.
You're always thinking worst-case scenario.
You always have to think, if one player gets injured, where do I then go to, obviously? And I think with Harry Kane, I do think there is a problem. If Harry Kane then gets injured, you could then go with Rashford, Calvert-Lewin, you could go with Sterling as a false forward or Foden. There are options that I think England could win games off. But I think with Harry Maguire injured, I think the ability to go to a back four is lost. And that's why he's still got the 3 in the back in his mind.
Are you discussing numbers? You know, defenders, we need to take 8. Do you have that set idea in your head?
I mean, the classic is the 8 defenders, 8 midfield players, 4 strikers, 2 in each position. It invariably doesn't work out like that, depending on different things. You try and sometimes maybe pinch a defender if you've got like a 7 defenders, but like one of your centre midfield players can play centre back. That can happen. But ordinarily, you'd be thinking 8 defenders. Where I think Gareth's really experienced is he won't try and pinch a position. And I've seen it. There's 2 problems that England managers that I've seen have over a 25-year period. One where they try and have faith in a player that's injured. To get a player who's fit maybe for the second game up to speed when you've got elite performers having been there for 4 weeks getting ready, it very rarely gets them right. So that's one way in which I don't think Gareth will be caught out by. The next is where you think, well, I won't take a second left back because so-and-so can play there. It doesn't work. It'll catch you out. Left back, right back. I think you ended up playing right back in the tournament once, didn't you? When
Caught me
injured.
Out.
Yeah, I got injured and Carragher was the backup right back. And it doesn't work. And then David Beckham, I think, ended up playing right back. So you try and pinch a position, that doesn't work. So for me, the 2 key positions on the pitch, I think Declan Rice being injured is a problem. I'd go with Maguire, just because of the lack of depth behind Maguire. So Kane's the most important player. But Maguire, the problem is the lack of depth behind Maguire as a dominant centre-back is nil, in my opinion. So Maguire, Kane and then Rice, I think, are the key players I would say you wouldn't want to get injured. Because if Sterling got injured, it'd be a big blow. But Rashford, Greenwood, Sancho, Foden, Grealish, you've got loads of players that could play in that position.
But Jamie also went to a tournament and didn't play. So are you thinking about trying to pick a squad where everyone is going to be involved, or are you thinking about good characters who might not complain if they're not involved?
Definitely, that's a factor as well. No, you're definitely thinking that as well, because the lads who aren't playing can become a problem if they're not motivated or if they're not good team members. You are thinking that as well. There's no doubt about that. But look, I think the big thing would be that you're always thinking, what happens if the players pick themselves? But what Gareth will be thinking is the big thing for Gareth, for me, would be around back 4, back 3. If Maguire's not fit, I think it becomes a back 3. Because I don't see Stones and Dyer, Stones and Cody. I don't see it. I can't feel that that's going to win a tournament for England. I think that the only chance that we've got of playing a back 4, which Gareth will want to do at times, is the Maguire-Stones partnership.
Well, remember, we talked earlier about what we think that Gareth might do, particularly around the right-back position, but this is very much what Gary and Jamie are planning to do, or would be planning to do, and you've agreed on 20. So let's have a look at those names to start things off, and we'll digest these. The goalkeepers. This is what you've both agreed with, the 20 players that you've both picked.
You've gone for Trent.
I mean,
you've bottled it. You argued for this at the beginning. You've turned at the last minute. You argued for Kieran Trippier.
Honestly, it's like dealing with Donald Trump and Boris Johnson. You shout loud. It's like a fan TV, honestly.
You said at the start, Kieran Trippier is the best at playing wing-back and has got the best set-piece delivery.
Oh, my gosh. Can I just... Honestly,
you asked me... Do you believe that?
Let me finish. You asked me a question before the show. Why would Gareth not want to take Trent?
I did ask you that question.
Thank you. So I then said, these are the reasons why I think he would be looking at Trippier and say Walker as being better options. I would take Trent Alexander-Arnold, and have done since 12 o'clock at lunchtime. He knows that.
No
it's
chance.
Like Boris Johnson.
Honestly.
He just shouts really loud and everyone thinks, is he telling the truth? He might be telling the truth here.
You said he went to a tournament, he's a better wing. Do you think Kieran Trippier is a better wing-back than Trent? And he's got more experience in a tournament?
He's got more experience in a tournament, that's a fact. He's played more at wing-back for England, that's a fact.
Yes, and you said he was better at set-pieces.
He served Gareth Southgate well.
So why are you not taking him then, if he's that good?
I'm going to tell you what Gareth will be thinking.
How do you know what Gareth's thinking?
Oh, my... Because it's obvious. He's left him out last week and picked Trippier.
OK, so you're telling me why? Why are you not picking Kieran Trippier then?
Am I missing something here?
Well, that's a fair question. Why do he not be in your squad, Trippier?
Well, we don't know he's not. I like Kieran Trippier. I would pick Trent Alexander-Arnold in front of Kieran Trippier. I was asked before why I thought Gareth Southgate would pick Trippier and Walker over Trent Alexander-Arnold. I gave my answers, and I stand by them. Watch it back. However, I would pick Trent Alexander-Arnold with Kyle Walker. However, game number one, if it was game number one against Croatia and Perisic was left wing, I would pick Walker as right back. I wouldn't pick Trent Alexander-Arnold. Definitely not.
Let me just pick up on a couple that have made both of their squads. Jack Grealish is in both squads. Is that a given for everybody, do you think?
I think it should be. I think there was a little bit of talk the last few days because he was injured and that Gareth may not pick him. And I think someone at the FA or the England squad's actually tried to quell that talk and fed something out.
Bit of briefing been going on.
Yeah, but listen, I can understand because something sometimes gains momentum. You know, social media is like the media, this furore around Grealish is not going. Grealish is going. He has to go. I think what he did in the games that he was playing before Christmas, certainly I think it was the game away in Belgium, he was a real standout player. And I think he's a special talent. There's no doubt in my mind that Grealish doesn't go. Coming
back to what I was saying before, if you think about the fact that Stones and Maguire play, Rice and Henderson play, or Rice and Phillips, and then you've got Kane up front, you've got a really strong, sturdy spine with that back four. If Kane was to get injured and say a Maguire of that type, you go into a completely different type of playing where you need fluidity. Because you can't really then, you need the types of Grealish and Foden and people like that then to come in. To go for a back three where you're going to be basically a completely different system, the wing-backs, I think at that point... So I think the idea of having Grealish in there, he's a match winner. I think he impressed when he went into the squad. There was a suggestion that he might not fit in within the squad. I think he did enough in those games in November. And I would definitely take him.
And really, in the last season, Calvin Phillips has come from nowhere to be in both your squads.
He plays the position really well in that midfield too, alongside Rice. I think he plays... What Gareth's been really good at and fantastic at, other than doing a great job, is that he's played players who are in form and in position. So if you think about it, Trent Alexander-Arnold for Liverpool, you would pick him, but his form for England isn't quite as good as it is for Liverpool. That's another thing that should be mentioned. So he picks players that have done well for him for England. And there are very few players who play better for England than they do for their clubs. And I think someone like a Calvin Phillips, he replicates his club form for England. I think other players do that as well. I think Jesse Lingard plays really well for England. Danny Welbeck used to play better for England. His stats were better for England than his club. So some players really adapt well to international football in England. I think Calvin Phillips has adapted well. He plays the position well and he does what Gareth Southgate wants.
All right, let's have a look at the differences between these two squads then. And we'll have a look at Gary's completed 23. First of all, in bold... Eric Dyer is added as a centre-back. In midfield, he's gone with James Ward-Prowse. Mason Greenwood as the extra forward. What do you think of that, Jamie?
No, not Eric Dyer for me. No, I mean, obviously, Gary's got a relationship with him. He took him to a tournament, didn't you? And he played midfield. And I don't... You did, didn't you?
Yeah, it was the relationship bit I was talking about.
No, what I'm saying is you played him in midfield in that tournament, so you've put him in the squad, you've championed him. I don't think he's quite done enough, certainly for Tottenham. He can't get in the Tottenham team, can he? I don't think...
Not in the last couple of weeks.
Has he been in the last couple of... I don't think he has he? So he can't get in the Tottenham team, but he wants to put him in the England squad, so I can't quite work that one out. So Greenwood, he knows Greenwood better than me. He does look like he's going to be a star.
Why has he made it into your squad at this stage?
I think he's a brilliant finisher. I think if Harry Kane got injured, then... I think we've seen Calvert-Lewin tonight, what Calvert-Lewin is. I see Calvert-Lewin as somebody who is against a top team, half an hour to go, we're 1-0 up, to run the line, run them ragged, close down, harass, potentially get a goal. But I think his finishing is a little bit erratic. I think if England are going to need a goal, they're 1-0 down against the team, I would bring Greenwood on because I think he's a finisher. He's a brilliant finisher. A better finisher than Rashford. Naturally a better finisher than Sterling, even though he hasn't got the goals of Sterling. And I think he's got that quality to working sharp and so in tight spaces and around the box. I think he's exceptional. And that's not just because he plays for Manchester United. I think he's different than the other one. So I'll try and work a way to get him into the squad in case Kane got injured. Because I don't think there's a natural replacement for Kane in terms of finisher. And I think Greenwood's the only one really that can finish. We
saw him get into a really good position last night and score with his head, I think for the first time for Manchester United. Yeah. Is there a possibility, he hasn't scored that many goals this season compared to his breakthrough season last time, if he finishes this season well, that he could actually force Gareth Southgate's hand?
I don't think he'll get in the squad, by the way. So this is really clear when I define between what Gareth will do and what I would do.
If he finishes the season well?
Yeah, look, if he scores 7 in his last 10, I think Gareth's really resolute, though, in what he wants to do. I don't think Greenwood will get anything if he scores 7 in 10. I think he sees his squad up front. I think he'll use Sterling as that, what would be that fourth striker, if you like. But when you've only got really Rashford, who, to be fair, plays on the left most of the time, Calvert-Lewin and Kane as what would be natural strikers, I think Rashford and Calvert-Lewin need space to run into. Kane can play, to be fair, in any type of, any part of the pitch. My concern is if Kane got injured, you've got 2 what would be counter-attack type strikers. And if anything, if we're playing against a team that sits deep, who's the one to be able to manipulate the ball? Yeah, you could play Grealish up there, or you could play Foden in different positions. But I just think for me, Greenwood, I'll try and get that fourth striker in who can be a little bit different. But that's just me. You know, Gareth's not picked Mason now since last August, September, since that incident.
The Iceland trip.
And I don't think he'll get in now.
All right, let's have a look at Jamie's 23. Adding 2 more defenders, Connor Cody and Reece James, and Jude Bellingham, who we saw with England last week coming into the midfield. Let's talk about him first then Jamie. Jude Bellingham, what was it impressed you about him that puts him ahead of the likes of James Ward-Prowse that Gary's gone with?
He's playing for Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League, and I think he's going to be a star of the future for England. I think he's one of them who'll be in the squad who you'd always look at those 2 or 3 players who maybe aren't involved as much, but you're almost putting him in the squad for the future. Not to say he's not good enough, by the way. He's playing in the Champions League for Borussia Dortmund to be involved tomorrow against Manchester City. So, yes, Ward-Prowse, who I think is a very good Premier League player, but this lad's playing at a higher level. And I just think he's one to put in. I still think you have Henderson, Rice, Phillips in there at this moment. So there's still sort of 3 central midfield players. And he is almost a 4th on there if there's an emergency. But just having him around, and I just think he's a special talent. And I think he's one definitely to take.
He's gone with 3 right-backs. You can have your say on that now.
I mean, it's bizarre. I mean, he's gone with 4 centre-backs, 3 right-backs and 2 left-backs. He's done 9 defenders, which, to be fair, I mean, it is bizarre.
You said Garrett's got to go, if he wants to win the tournament, he's got to be pragmatic, didn't you? And he could go to a back 5 as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also want Trent in. I want Trent in because you're talking about Ward-Prowse. No, I want Trent in because, as I said earlier on the show, when he's changed his mind, obviously, over 90 minutes, because he's had that much stick on social media about Trent. But you want Trent Alexander-Arnold in that position where I think only Kevin De Bruyne's better than him in Wales football. Now, whether that's a wing-back, right-back, or right of a midfield 3, get him in that role on the ball. And you're talking about players who would like to play against Trent. You're talking about the wingers, Hazard, Perisic you just mentioned. Ask Harry Kane who he'd want on the ball there. He'd want him there before any other England player. So I think there could be a case that Trent may actually come from the bench if England needed a goal. And you say, as a midfield player, so I'd rather have him on the ball than maybe Ward-Prowse in that position. And you're talking about him maybe struggling in one-off games, I think you said earlier on, against a France or a Belgium or... This player to be... No, you did before. No, you did. You said those players would want to play against Trent and he'd struggle defensively.
I said, who would Mbappe like to play against?
Yeah, you've had your say, not a problem. This is a player who's got to 2 Champions League finals. The Champions League's a higher level than international football, I can assure you. We've both been there. And this is a player who's played against every top player there is. He's won the Champions League. You got to a Champions League final. So this thing that you couldn't play, I think it's just nonsense. I mean, the fact that you've changed your mind, I think says it all.
Right, OK. Well, I never changed my mind. I picked my squad at 12 o'clock. I mean, it's the most embarrassing analysis I've ever seen of a situation. So when you play for your club at Liverpool, they have 65% possession in most games, right? And they play a certain way. And he's got world-class players like Salah and Mane and other players around him. If England are going to win this tournament, it will be a more pragmatic style where they'll have less...
Hence why I've gone for more defenders.
Let me finish. Where they'll have less of the ball, which means they'll have to defend more. And they'll simply have to win the tournament through what would be potentially timed pragmatic football, set pieces, and doing it in a different way than Liverpool. So it's like saying you played for Man United and you do it this way. Yeah, but we'd have 60% possession. We had Ronaldo and Tevez. To win for England, it will be different in the summer against Spain, Holland, Belgium and all those countries. So the idea that Trent Alexander-Arnold can play the same way for England when he's basically going to have 35-40% possession against a Belgium versus play 60% possession for England, for Liverpool, is just a nonsense. It's different completely. Gareth has got different needs and ways to win this tournament. I would put the reason that I would put you don't need 9 defenders for a start.
So why have you put him in the squad?
And I've put Ward-Prowse. I like it because he's a brilliant player.
Go on.
I put Ward-Prowse in. Ward-Prowse is outstanding in that area. He plays naturally in that area. Gareth's had him in the 21s. He trusts him. He knows that he'll get into that right channel naturally. He'll feed, but he's a brilliant crossover ball.
Would you rather have James Ward-Prowse on the ball there than Trent in that position?
If you said to me, who would I trust more to play in the right of a 3 in midfielder or in that position where you're talking about, in the last 20 minutes of a game, Ward-Prowse plays there. Gareth will trust Ward-Prowse in that position rather than putting Trent Alexander-Arnold in the right of a 3 in midfield because he plays there for his club. And Gareth does this, and he's, to be fair, been proved right by playing players that are less fashionable. Look, managers over the years for England have picked players who play for clubs and have been more fashionable in the top 4. Gareth, to be fair, has done it a different way, and he's proved to be right. And on Ward-Prowse, he gets into that position in the right channel. His delivery is exceptional. By the way, it's exceptional on set pieces and in open play. So that's why I put Ward-Prowse in to deal with the area that he's just talked about with Trent Alexander-Arnold.
It's extraordinary. You can have a row about Trent Alexander-Arnold in the squad and you both picked him.
Exactly. Unbelievable. Can we just... He can't stand it. He's put him in the squad.
Can we expel this myth? Did I pick Trent Alexander-Arnold in my squad at 12 o'clock today?
You did, Gary.
Thank you very much.
The phrase phone boxing argument, though, springs to mind with these two. Let's talk about 3 players that you've both omitted. Jesse Lingard, who we've seen starring tonight, he's been in terrific form. Bukayo Saka, and I mention him because the phrase sort of versatility gets thrown around when we're talking about England squads. And Jadon Sancho, who's been a player that really burst onto the scene really probably last season.
Jadon Sancho is almost what I've said about Jude Bellingham. He's playing at a really high level. His numbers are off the scale. I've just never been fully convinced in an England shirt yet, and I just think with the emergence of sort of Foden and Jack Grealish as part of the front 3, someone had to miss out, and I just think he misses out. I think Saka, when I was doing the squad, a lot of the time he was in it, you're starting to think of different things, and I wanted him to be in it. But it was almost that he could play that many positions that, in some people's eyes, that might be a strength for Gareth. For me, it was almost a weakness where, at first, I had him in ahead of Chilwell. I must say that, and I was thinking, if Shaw got injured in that first game, Saka, who at times can play on the right wing, would you really want him as a left-back in a back 4 if you were playing a back 4 in a game, really? And I looked at that and I maybe went with the safe option in terms of Chilwell playing that role, plays wing-back for Chelsea. I think Gareth will go to a back 5 at some stage. And who's the other one you mentioned?
The other one was Jesse Lingard.
I just think with Mount, Foden and Grealish, all not exactly the same, but those type of players, I just think Lingard is probably slightly different. Maybe they're all similar, but I just couldn't leave one of those out. And Lingard's maybe got the energy and the pace, maybe, but he was one of just...
Who of those 3 would have the strongest case for you?
Sancho, because I think he's been in most of the squads, and I think Lingard, I come to the same conclusion. If you've got Mount and Grealish, Sterling, Foden, you've got enough players who can play what would be in that connection position that, to be fair, I think can do that role.
But not the versatility of Saka.
I love Saka, but again, who would you leave out instead of Saka? The question you've always got to ask is, I love him, you'd like to have more players in, but who would you leave out?
Would you
go with Grealish? Would you leave out Sterling out? Would you leave Grealish out? Would you leave Foden out? Would you leave Mount out? No.
Could you take one specialist left back?
don't try and pinch a position. Honestly, it will bite you like you wouldn't believe. Let's say there's a brilliant right winger that's going to play against us in the tournament at some point, which there will be, and Saka's left back, and you're thinking, right, I've got to make... Because how are we going to win this tournament as England? How do we do well in the World Cup? You know, we were pretty solid. Set pieces were outstanding. We scored a lot of our goals from set pieces. We had a good draw, and we got to the semi-final. The first time we played against a team that really passed it well, to be fair, and dominated and run us down, we struggled. So we're going to have to get through these games against what would be the top opposition by having less of the ball. I just think having a defender that's not a defender most of the time is not something Gareth's going to do. He's not going to take that risk.
All right, let's have a look at the actual 11s that they've chosen, and there's agreement again. This is what we've asked them to do. Come up with an 11 for the first game. What's your ideal selection for going into the tournament? And there are 7 nailed down positions. You've got Stones, Maguire and Shaw, Rice and Mount in midfield, Sterling and Kane as 2 of the forwards. So goalkeeper, let's have a look what Jamie and Gary have gone with. Jamie sticks with Jordan Pickford, but Gary, you've gone for Dean Henderson.
I have, because I think if he finishes the season, which he's likely to do now, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's obviously made that call last night, I think that he'll be in a situation whereby Jordan Pickford's injured at the moment. He's missed the last few weeks. I think that Henderson will be in a position whereby he'll be England's number 1 if he, you know, that's where I feel. I mean, look, it's a bit of a prediction that he's going to finish the season well, but that's where I feel at this moment. I don't think it'll happen. I think that, you know, Gareth will go with Jordan Pickford, but I would think that Henderson, England need a really good number 1 goalkeeper to emerge in the next few years, and I think that Henderson, for me, could be that one.
Is he a Manchester United number 1 moving forward?
That's still a big question. That's the point around Trent with Liverpool versus Trent with England. You're talking about completely different standards. Manchester United goalkeepers, you know, Alisson is an unbelievable goalkeeper. Can he get to that level? I'm not sure, because the teams that win leagues have amazing goalkeepers. And is Dean Henderson amazing? That's the bit that needs to be worked out in this next few months, stroke year. Let's
see if we've got a surprise at right back. I must dread having another conversation about this. So maybe we won't. Jamie's gone with Trent and Gary's gone with Kyle Walker. All right, let's go.
This is because we're playing Croatia first game. Perisic is quick, he's powerful, and I think that Walker's better suited to him.
And do you agree with what Gary's saying on that? Do you understand the point he's making on that?
Yeah, I mean, the full... I think this squad, because of the season that we've had, I think there should be almost what you do at club level, where you'd have a bit of rotation. And the positions where, you know, we had the exact same 7 or 8, and the 3 that have sort of were slightly different, they're possibly the positions that I would be rotating. So yes, I've gone with Trent there, but in terms of, like, if we're talking about the first game, but I'd certainly be playing Trent against Scotland. I'd be looking at situations where players would be suited to certain roles. But in terms of, like, Kane and Sterling at the top, they're on the team sheet. I think Mason Mount made himself that in midfield, where he plays no matter what the opposition. I think Declan Rice is the same. We'll see with Jordan Henderson in terms of injury. But I do think with the injuries we've had this season, I do think there has to be rotation within the squad.
OK, the final midfield position in both of their teams needs to be filled. They've gone with Rice and Mount, both of them. And you've stuck with Jordan Henderson, Jamie, where Gary goes for Calvin Phillips. Why do you think Henderson has to play?
He's a leader. You think of the tournament he's been involved in. I think, yes, Harry Kane's the captain, but it almost feels like he's not just vice-captain Jordan Henderson. He almost feels like he's on the same level as Harry Kane. They were both vying for that position. And I think he's a big voice and a big leader. I think his stature has grown in the last 2 or 3 years in terms of lifting a Champions League, lifting the Premier League. And I just think he's got that presence that you'd want in midfield. And listen, I see a lot of teams, and we haven't done this, where they pick either Rice and Henderson, and they maybe pick Foden in there and Mount. I think that's a nonsense. And Gareth Southgate gets criticised for there's 2 holding midfield players. There's no way England can go into this tournament with one of those players and Foden there and Mount. I don't believe that. I think Grealish and Foden are more part of the front 3. I think Mount's more part of the midfield 3. So that's why I'd have that creativity with Mount in there. But I definitely think you need those 2 players, whether it's Phillips or Henderson or Declan Rice, in those positions. And I think the criticism of the manager for this 2 holding midfield players is a nonsense. Because when I see some of the teams, it's just getting all the attacking players in there. Everyone wants Grealish, Foden and Mount in the team. You can only get 2 out of 3 in the team. And I've gone for Mount and... Okay.
Well, do you
to be confirmed.
Do you agree with the principle of that?
I agree with the principle of two. I just think for me that Phillips is more used to playing the passes through the lines at Leeds. I think Henderson, to be fair, is good on the ball. I think Rice is good on the ball, but I think Phillips is the best out of the three on the ball in terms of accepting the ball and getting it off the back four. I think it's become a really important thing for England to be able to connect the back to the front, and where England have struggled over many, many years is the ability to be able to do that and get the ball through their midfield. I think Calvin Phillips, through his work with Bielsa, is used to getting on the ball all the time, half turn, popping it through the lines into the likes of Mount and Sterling, Rashford, Foden, all those players that might play. So for me, I'd just go for Phillips alongside Rice.
All right, one more position in the forward line, as both have gone with Kane and Sterling. Jamie's gone for Jack Grealish, and Gary, Marcus Rashford.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked also at the team that we're playing against in the first game, which he wasn't aware of until we told him in the break, that it's Croatia. So I would say that we could end up being without the ball. And I think that having those two quick players, I always think Harry Kane needs players doing that. You know, Son and Mora or Bergwijn, whoever it is, he's always better when he's got players running past him.
The front three that was very successful doing that against Spain.
Very, very. He needs those players running past him. And I think if we're not going to have the ball, and Harry could be up there, if you think about how Harry's played for Tottenham this season, where he drops into that deep position, he picks up the ball, I can see that against Croatia. And then those two really arriving quickly. Grealish, Foden for another game, no problem. I think for this game against Croatia, with the likes of Modric in the midfield, etc., we know how Croatia are going to play. They've got good midfield players. I would just go for the ones that are a bit quicker alongside Harry Kane.
But why are you obsessed with the opposition always having the ball?
Because they will.
So why can't we do something about that? Was that your mentality going into the tournament yourself?
I think that's the front three that Gareth will pick as well.
But it's always the opposition are going to do this, the opposition are going to do that.
I played at a club for 20 years, I didn't worry about the opposition, so don't worry about that.
Did you worry about it when you got to England?
No, not really. No, but one point is you've got to understand that with England, you've got to win differently than you do with your club like Manchester United.
Would you not have more of the ball if Grealish was playing?
The problem is, we've seen England play against the top teams in the last few years. England is still better in the counter-attack against the top teams. Look, I could sit here and be pure, and I do want England to one day dominate tournaments. We've got more technical players. They're definitely getting better technically. The players are fantastic that are coming through. I love watching some of the young players. We're not quite at that level yet for Gareth, whereby I think in 2 tournaments, 3 tournaments' time, the full emergence of an England team that can dominate the ball against the top teams in tournaments could arrive. I don't think we're quite there yet. So I still think at this moment, to be more successful, mixing it up, whereby you trust those talented players in certain games, but against Croatia, first game, be a little bit more, still try and get on the ball. But actually, the idea that, you know, they would still have that penetration from counter-attack is going to be important. Set pieces and counter-attack are going to be important for England against the big teams. As much as I'd love us to have 65% possession, it isn't going to happen. So I'd love it to happen, but it's not going to happen.
Is that why you've gone for Grealish then?
I just think the ability on the ball, and I've said, and I've likened him to almost like a level below a Hazard, that type of player, getting on the ball, coming inside, and he just provides something different. And I think if other countries had a player of that talent, it wouldn't even be a debate whether he's in the team or not. And that's why I go back to, I know England can't go there and pretend to be Spain, but you're talking about we're not technically good enough.
No, I didn't say that.
No, what I'm saying is, no, you said in 2 or 3 tournaments' time they might be...
We could dominate the ball against a Spain or a Belgium.
So you don't think we're technically good enough to dominate the ball right now?
I don't think we're ready yet to do that. Do you?
No, so what I'm saying is that's what you feel.
But do you think that?
I don't think they're as poor as what you think. No, so my point is that the mentality going in? Will we ever win a tournament if we don't dominate possession? Is it possible? You're talking about winning it on set pieces. I get that. England got to a semi-final under Gareth Southgate, and it doesn't matter how you win football games. If you win on set pieces, if you win on counter-attack. But more often than not, teams who, and we've seen it so often when we've played, if you don't keep the ball, you just end up running out of legs, as we did in certain games.
Well, what do you think England's best approach is for this tournament right now to go and win it?
In terms of...
England, terms of their tactical
you've got the players you've got. And I think we should be a little bit more on the front foot. And I'm not talking about gung-ho and go flying foot, all that. I'm playing 2 holding midfield players. Obviously, England haven't got the best players in Europe. But I just feel as if what you're saying in terms of the mentality of we're almost accepting before the game they'll have more of the ball. And I'm a bit like, why do we accept that? That's what I'm saying. Is it the players not being good enough technically, or are we mentally going into games already thinking they'll have more of the ball? We've got players who, yes, in a game, if the other team play better than us, they have more of the ball. But I don't think the mentality going into the game should be they're going to have more of the ball. It's like when we criticise teams coming up against, say we've criticised Newcastle in this, or coming up against Liverpool or City. City are off the scale, to be fair. But it's almost this acceptance that they're going to have the ball. Why should Croatia have more of the ball? Just because they've got Modric? Get after him, man, mark him. Are the other players of Croatia that good? That we accept Croatia going to have the ball? We can't play Trent Alexander-Arnold against Perisic. I mean, it's like, oh my God.
It's a bit of a contradiction.
No, it's not
he
a
wants
contradiction.
to play two holding midfield players because he thinks that basically that's the way England need to go, but then he wants to dominate possession. I mean, ultimately...
So you can't dominate possession with two midfield players? There's another player in there in Mount.
The two holding midfield players that you picked will not dominate the ball against Croatia's midfield, I can assure you of that. Honestly, I've been to 8 tournaments as a player and a coach with England. And I've
lost every single same way.
I've been with you a lot of the time. And I've suffered badly playing in 4-4-2s where we've not had the ball and it's been a real struggle and it's been painful. I wish we had more belief. I went to tournaments where we had Scholes, Gerrard and Lampard and we played them out of position. It wasn't quite right. And we didn't have that belief. We were counter-attacking. I hated it. Because I played in a team that dominated possession and won trophies for a long time. So the fact of the matter is, I know what it's like to play in a team that dominates the ball. I did it. I was lucky enough to be part of that team, you know, and I know what it's like. You need to win. You dominate. I've been saying it for 10 years, but I don't think Gareth will think the best way of winning this tournament is having Grealish, Mount, Foden, Sterling, all those players in the team. He'll go more pragmatic. Not to say he won't want to get on the ball. He will want to get on the ball, but he won't think he can keep 65% possession against Spain and Belgium.
Never said Spain or
and
Belgium.
Germany.
Croatia's the first. Exactly.
Well, Croatia's the best teams in the world.
Those teams you're mentioning, they're not Croatia.
Right, okay.
Are we accepting Croatia? We just accept going into the game, they'll have more, but Croatia.
Okay. Well, I think it's interesting that neither of you go with Foden as one of England's most technical players, but you've explained your reasons why, because you're trying to fit others into that starting 11. Final thought on this, and try and put yourself in Gareth Southgate's shoes on this one, Gary. Will he be thinking, and Qatar is just around the corner, will he be thinking that these Euros on home soil is really his best chance of winning a trophy?
This is definitely the best chance. This is definitely the best chance because ultimately you've got the momentum from the last tournament. I think the team are in better shape. Look, things like Rice being out for 6 weeks, you know, fingers crossed Kane doesn't pick up an injury in the next few weeks. Harry Maguire, Stones stay fit. All these things that are big factors because the drop in depth from Maguire to the next centre-back is big. The drop in depth from Kane to the next centre-forward is massive. It's huge. You look at other countries and what they've got. They've got lots of quality players in positions that, you know, we've got good players in certain positions, but when it really matters, that final third of the pitch, that world class, we just have one or two maybe. And so ultimately, a lot of things need to go right for England, for Gareth, but I think we've got a great chance. We've got a great chance because I think he's got a good group of players. I think we've got a really good manager who knows how to do well in tournaments. He's got the most experience out of anybody in terms of coaching in tournaments, under-21 tournaments. He's been obviously with England as a player in tournaments since in the good and the bad, Euro 96 then to 2000 and things like that. To me, I trust in him completely. But this is the best chance. My fear after the last tournament was when we walked off that pitch against Croatia was that those players wouldn't witness a semi-final again. And maybe that comes from my personal experience that I had. A little Stuart Pearce comment that came to me after Euro 96 when we lost that semi-final that night against Germany. He said, this could be as good as it gets. And I was 20 at the time and I didn't believe it. He was right. And those lads that were in sort of World Cup semi-final against Croatia 2 years ago, I hope they get that semi-final chance again. I hope they get that chance again because I think they could take it if they get that chance at Wembley. I think they could take it.
Did Terry Venables accept Holland to have more of the ball in Euro 96?
They did have more of the ball.
You won 4-1.
Have you watched the game?
I watched it. I've done a book actually, and I've done a chapter on that.
That sounds a perfect time to finish.
I've mentioned that book on this show before.
So this is the myth of Terry Venables. This is the myth, right?
Oh yeah, there we go.
No, Scotland. No, in that tournament, I loved him by the way. Scotland outplayed us for large parts of the game. Spain battered us and kept probably 75% possession, and Holland had more of the ball than us. People think we went and dominated possession, and we were like, honestly, watch the games. Watch the games. England have not dominated the ball in a tournament, as far as I can remember, against the top teams. So I'd love to change that. I'd love to witness it, because obviously I'm not going to coach it anymore, and I don't want to. My point is, I'd love to see it, but I don't think it's going to happen this summer.
So Terry's a fraud.
Well, Graham Souness quietly confident about Scotland's chances, speaking to him yesterday.
Jesus.
Graham Souness quietly confident, I would say. We'll see what happens.
Well, they're going to have loads of the ball, aren't they?
90% possession.
Yeah, we haven't played Scotland. Whoa, 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 whoa.